Hey all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we are taking a closer look at Samsung's Dex, which is a mode that you can find on their smartphones like the S8, S9, S10, and also premium tablets like the Samsung Galaxy Tab S6. Once you connect the phone or tablet through USB Type-C to a larger monitor or TV, it transforms into a pseudo-desktop mode, which displays apps in a similar fashion to, say, Windows. It's not completely new to just Samsung. We've seen it tried in the past through Motorola's Atrix and their lap docks. We also saw it with Asus and their transformer tabs. Then there's Windows Continuum, which explores the same concept back when Windows 10 phones were still around. But Samsung seems to be one of the last manufacturers to still be alive in trying to push this trend of convergence, and they've retained it even on their latest flagship phones. So let's take a closer look at how it fares in terms of doing basic tasks, what the interface is like here in 2020. If the monitor is a touchscreen, you can also interact with it using your fingers. And that's the case with this Boss Touch monitor that we're using for our demo. We can interact with it using our fingers, and as you can see, it becomes just like a giant tablet. Phone itself will actually pop up a virtual on-screen keyboard, so it can still allow you to type things in, but again, it makes it more of a abrupt transition. So the phone basically becomes just a keyboard and also a blank touchpad when we're in the Dex mode. So we can use this to interact with the virtual mouse. We can pinch in and pinch out using multi-touch. We can double tap to bring up additional controls. Alright, so really taking a closer look at this desktop experience upon just a cursory examination, it does really feel like a Chromebook or a Windows computer. So for example, I can long hold on, say, Google Maps and then drag it out onto this main desktop, and you can see it's now added. The next time I reconnect it, it will pick off in the exact same spot. Now on the very bottom, we have access to the traditional Android keys. This takes us back home, back, and also opens up a contextual menu screen that you can use to multitask. Very top of the bar, we have the ability to full size an application to take advantage of the entire display. I can also minimize it and also shrink it down, so it's going to be open in the background. You see it as a small dot in the very bottom portion. I can actually hover over it to see a quick preview of what that app is like. Again, very similar to other desktop operating systems like Windows and Chrome OS. So I can close out of it and it will be purged from my memory. I can also tap on the three dots here basically to open up my entire list of applications. Again, this part isn't too different, although we always have access to universal search on the very top now. There's also a reminder here that tells you to check out some specific applications which are optimized for Samsung Dex, and that's a link that will take you into the Samsung version of the App Store and tell you which applications and publishers have optimized applications for Dex. And the thing we can see here is it's not a huge selection of apps. Right now it's still rather limited, even though Dex has been out now for almost 3 years. However, most of the ones that you see here do work, and they are mostly from productivity related tools, which makes sense because again, if you are using this in a desktop mode, most likely you'll be using it for things like email, as well as doing some light work. So as an example, if I tap on HandCalm Office, which I've already installed, you can see that it will show as something that's been optimized for Samsung Dex. In this screen, there's going to be a kind of splash screen on top that says Samsung Dex. The interface will be obviously different from if you open this app on the Android phone itself in the mobile version, because now the layout with the different features through a toolbar on the top is more similar to on a desktop. We have smaller icons which would be obviously harder to press if they were on the phone itself on a smaller screen, but they've been scaled up to resemble a desktop version of the app. If we zoom in a little bit, we can actually tap on this to minimize it to make it less cluttered, but to expand it, we have access to all the features. Basically, these are just notifications for various reminders and system properties. For instance, you can see if Samsung Health is turned on or off. You're also able to see if the Dex mode is turned on. You can tap on this actually to turn the virtual touchpad on the screen here on or off. Tapping on it also reminds you what some of the controls correspond to, like how to swipe, how to pinch to zoom. This little house icon also allows us to switch between Dex mode and true screen mirroring mode. Now it becomes just a perfect replica of what the phone's display is showing. So it becomes a way for you to maybe do a quick look at a photo that you want to share with someone on a larger screen without going into that desktop mode where you have to reopen certain apps, for example, or want to do some productivity. Now we can also take a look at our Wi-Fi properties if we're connected to things. We can also see if we're in an airplane mode, our battery status remaining. Now the thing here is, again, some of these dialogues still pop up as a regular Android view, so it pops up as the battery status inside of the Android OS, which is not as optimized as what I'd like to see. Samsung still has a little work to do in terms of consistency because, again, with Wi-Fi notifications, they always pop up on the right-hand side, which is what we're used to on a desktop OS. But again, if we tap on battery for whatever reason, it pops up on the middle of the screen. You can also tap on the full quick settings, which basically is the same as the drag down drawer that you would see on Android OS. The question mark here gives you more tutorials on how to use DeX. It will take you to Samsung's kind of website. Over here, we have the ability to go into experimental modes. So if there are any new features, say you're walking away from your desk, you can actually lock it as well just by tapping on this key. And from here, you can say it says tap anywhere to unlock. We can also control things like the volume. So we can tap on here, and this will bring up a bar on the side that you can drag up and down, very similar to Android. But the placement here on the bottom corner does make sense. We can also capture a screenshot, and then we can also access a quick search that will also pop up in the bottom here. It's acting as universal search. The bottom here that shows the time and date information is basically just for view. You can't actually really interact with it. It will open up a calendar, but again, it's a little bit disjoint from the desktop experience. Contextual features have also been retained. So if you right click on a mouse or use two fingers and click using the phone's touchpad, you can bring up additional controls. Now, as far as the functionality of the applications are concerned, again, not a ton of apps are taking full advantage of DeX right now. Say YouTube, it's still going to be very similar to if you were just mirroring the phone's display. So not 100% optimized with all the Google apps and third-party apps that you'll see. With that being said, most of the Samsung proprietary versions of applications have been optimized to perform quite well. So if we, for example, open up Samsung's version of the browser or Samsung's version of the Gallery app or email apps, what we'll see is the experience is transformed compared to what we find on the mobile version itself. For example, we have tab browsing. So all of the different windows that we have open are displayed up top, very similar to a Chrome browser on a Chromebook or on a desktop class browser. So we have lots of tabs that we can switch back and forth between and try to load up the site. We can see that it is loading in the same way that you would have on a Chromebook, on your computer, on your laptop. So it just becomes a more kind of desktop and classic version. So for this part, in terms of web browsing, I would say it does work equally as well as a Chrome OS powered Chromebook. Beyond the address bar, we have also some quick shortcuts that instantly pop up, just very similar to what you find from a Chrome browser on a desktop, on a Chromebook. The experience does feel really comfortable. Same can be said with their other apps that Samsung have designed themselves, including their file manager, has a split screen now. Some third-party applications like the Microsoft Word also works just really well. It just feels like you're using a regular Windows machine. And again, just becomes very familiar, surprisingly fluid and fast. So the optimization on these apps have been done actually really quite well. So you can definitely use it for things like office tasks, for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint editing. It becomes a very comfortable experience in the DeX mode with a keyboard, with a mouse, with a larger monitor, and a UI experience that just feels very familiar. You know, device itself is still remaining really cool in terms of temperature. So it is not really heating up either, even though we're opening up what seems like a separate version of the OS. It's really comfortable and a surprisingly nice feature that you'll find pretty much exclusive now to Samsung's flagship phones. And the phone's power is definitely more than enough to handle these simple tasks here in 2020. Finally, although this is not really a direct feature, it's more of a workaround or hack, you're not restricted to using certain VPNs. If you do want to access something like a full desktop Windows environment, you definitely can just through the browser. So if your school or if your company provides a VPN service that can connect you to a remote virtual machine somewhere that has Windows OS on it, this can basically become just a screen to experience that when connected to the internet. And because we do have a larger screen now connected to a monitor or to a TV, and using a great browser like Chrome or Samsung's own internet browser, you're able to fully interact with it and get a more comfortable experience for getting some additional, more powerful work done. So that's more or less it as far as our closer look at Samsung DeX here in 2020. Coming back to our original question of whether or not this is good enough to use as kind of a pseudo work desktop experience, I would say it definitely could be. For folks that are using it for light productivity, mostly for Excel, PowerPoint, document editing. Compared to Chromebooks, which I think is its closest competitor, I would say the performance and overall usability is surprisingly close. You have access to all the regular Android apps you typically have on your phone, from games to other content, which although don't really take advantage of a desktop experience, it's still emulated. You can full screen them and you can multitask between them in a faster way when connected to a keyboard and mouse. There are a certain number of apps, which again from Samsung, a few from the App Store, which further improve on the usability. It's still not going to be a real replacement for a full-blown Windows machine or even a Linux machine if you are someone that's doing more advanced tasks. But again, if you're considering a Chromebook anyways, something that's light but still gets the basics done, then I think that this is actually not a shabby alternative that also works pretty well once you have everything hooked up. So if interested, you can check out more details in the links down below. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That was a deeper walkthrough and closer look at how DeX works and performs here in early 2020.